Welcome back, everybody. So I wanted to do some after the hunt stuff for you guys. It's a blizzard out right now. We were supposed to go back to Missouri and finish out the bow season there. Would have been our last hunt. My dad was going to come along, so we couldn't do that. So I've been defrosting a bunch of the meat from the 2 deer that I did get this year, and then I did find some other meat in my chest freezer that I had from last year. So we're going to make some beef jerky out of this stuff, and then we're also going to make some brats at a later date and some other stuff, so hot sticks. So I got this tote off Amazon. I got 3 of them. This is what I do a lot of my processing in. So I've got 3 bags of meat left here now in this one. This is all roast meat. The stuff that I found that was in my freezer, I had some tenderloin that I saved from last year in big chunks. So I cut those up last night, and some of them got repackaged and sealed and back into the freezer. And then I got about 4 pounds behind me in the red bowl that's going to be in beef jerky. So I got to get another pound. So we're going to go ahead, pull out a roast. And what we're going to do is trim off. This has only been down there for a little bit, but there's a little bit of freezer burn on it from being in the Ziploc bag that was in there. It was in the freezer a lot longer than I wanted it to be. We were going to pull this stuff back out a couple months ago and go ahead and do this, but unfortunately my meat slicer grenaded on me. So I put it all back in the freezer because I didn't want to do it by hand, but I haven't been able to get a new one. And I don't want this stuff sitting in there anymore without actually being beef jerky, and I don't want to waste any more of it. So it looks like that's about it. All the stuff that was freezer. I normally got good luck with Ziploc bags, but I think it's because my freezer was full and this stuff was up towards the top that's the main reason why I've had some freezer burn with it. So this has been out of the freezer for 24 hours, but everything is still solid. So I'm going to take just a regular butcher knife here. It's pretty sharp, and I'm going to go ahead and just eyeball and cut these off at about a 1/4 inch. Some are going to be thicker, some are going to be thinner. As I get to the more frozen areas, my knife, the blade is going to bend a little bit. And all this meat was trimmed of fat. All the silver skin is off. So I did that at the time that I got the deer. This is my mule deer from September that I'm cutting right now. So as you can see, that works out pretty nice with it being frozen like that. Even if I did have a meat slicer, I still would do it frozen like this. It makes less of a mess. And it cuts really nicely. I found that if you let it thaw out and do it completely defrosted, it cuts unevenly, doesn't cut it all the way off, leaves big ends on here, jams up your meat slicer. So we're just going to keep doing that for this whole roast. Should be a couple pounds here, so this will be enough to finish our first batch. So if you notice, I'm not on a cutting board. I had to throw my other cutting board out also. Ended up breaking. So I am going to run and purchase a new cutting board tomorrow, as long as the blizzard stops. And then that way, let me go ahead so you can see these slices here. I'm just going to set them back in here, get them out of the way. Yeah, so I'm going to get a new cutting board, hopefully from Farm and Fleet tomorrow. They got some real nice white ones that my mom has and my brother actually has used. I used it for my up north deer. Works out really slick, really protects the knives to where you don't have to sharpen them a whole lot. So for now, we just got to use this plastic plate, which does its job just fine. Then the flavor that we are going to do with these is going to be cracked pepper. I've had the best luck with PS Seasonings, and their cracked pepper does really good on masking any venison flavor. If you've got people in your family that noticeably can tell the difference between venison and beef, that one's a really good one because it covers it up really well. I really like the teriyaki, but the venison flavor does come through on that one. I've done some hickory with this particular same setup. I wasn't a huge fan of that, but it was pretty good. And then I've not done the mesquite for a couple of years, so I can't remember exactly how that tastes. I did that one with more beef the last time. And then I can't think of what the other one is right now that I've done. Nobody really liked that one, so we're not doing flat jerky with that anymore. So I got one here. It's a little thick. This is one of the defrosted ones, so I'm going to slice this one down a little thinner. This is something anybody can do at home. If you got a dehydrator or even a smoker, a lot of this stuff can get tossed in there. Alright, so we got all of our meat slices. You can see that they're nice and firm from being frozen yet. So what we're going to do, I'm just going to set them back on the plate here, and then I'll get the scale and show you guys weighing this out. We're looking for 5 pounds for the package that we bought. Alright, so we got our bowl out. Really old scale that I have. I use this for when I do chickens. So I zeroed the scale when I put the bowl on. As you can see, we've already got some venison in there. So we've got 3.5 pounds in there right now. And what we're looking for, the package that I'm going to use this time is a Backwoods cracked pepper. I got it for Christmas. I have not used that one yet. It's one package is exactly for 5 pounds. What I found with venison is you want to go a little bit light to get a little extra flavor out of it. Beef doesn't matter. So we're just going to take and keep adding some more chunks in here. I like to get like 4 3/4 pounds roughly. That seems to be a pretty good ratio. So we're at 4.5 now. We'll toss in a couple more slices. So we're a little over the 4.75 mark, but I'm going to leave it there. As you can see, nice little bowl. So we're going to leave this stuff sit for a little while on the counter. I'm probably going to leave it for about a half an hour on the counter. Try and get the rest of these to defrost, and then I'm going to stir this up. As you can see, I got some that are already, the ones I cut up last night, I put back in the fridge, they're defrosted. Then we'll come back and I'll show you the package and how we mix this stuff up and get it ready and sit in the marinade, and then we'll put it in the dehydrator hopefully tomorrow. Alright everybody, we're back. I had to leave this meat defrost longer than I thought, so it's been almost 24 hours since I last sliced it up last night. It's been sitting in the refrigerator, completely defrosted. I've taken it out of the bowl, drained out all the blood. I've got the meat sitting here in my tote. So now what we're going to do is add the seasoning packet. So today we're using the Backwoods cracked pepper. I typically use the PS Seasonings cracked pepper. But I'm sure that this one's going to be about the same. You really can't go wrong with cracked peppers. So for this, there's some instructions on the back. You can divide it up into 1 pound batches, or you can do 5 pound batches. That is the nice thing about this packet and PS PS Seasonings Jerky. You can do 5-pound batches, no measuring, just dump the whole packet in and you're done. So for this one, we got to add the entire pouch and 2.5 cups of water and the entire cure packet that's inside. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I've cut the bag open, got the cure packet out. It's just a little tiny bag inside there. So we're going to dump in this whole cure packet, or the whole seasoning packet, and then we're going to take this cure packet. We're going to go ahead and cut that open. So now that we've got that in there, we're going to add 2.5 cups of cold water. So we got our 1 cup. Two cups. Half cup. Now that those are in there, you're going to go ahead and stir this up really good. This Backwoods packet actually calls for a lot more water than a PS Seasonings. I believe theirs calls for like 1/2 cup for 5 pounds. So that's the difference between these two packets of seasoning that I typically use. So we're going to keep stirring this up. So as you can see here, it dissolved in there really nicely. So we're just going to keep stirring this for a little while. We're going to find any big clumps we can. I usually bring them to the side and kind of crush them off to the side here. Now we're going to add the meat. So it's all mixed in there really nicely. So now I'm going to go ahead and just drop in all 5 pounds of meat here. That mule deer that I shot, that meat's a little lighter than your typical venison. I noticed that when I was cutting that up right after I got that deer. Pretty much was the same thing with the other mule deer I got too, so I'm not sure. The mule deer is from farm country, the venison's from farm country, so you wouldn't think that there would be a difference. Alright, that's the last chunk. So now we're going to go ahead and start mixing. So the one issue with mixing typically is the meat's usually really cold. So your hands get really cold doing this, so just be aware of that. You can wear some nitrile gloves. That really doesn't help with the coldness on your hands. I'll usually stir for a while and then go ahead and take a little break and wash my hands under hot water, let them warm up, and then come back and redo this. I think what is going to happen with this Backwoods is going to be more of a brine marinade. There's going to be a lot of liquid left inside of this container. When you do a PS Seasonings, that 1/2 cup of water is just enough to keep everything moist, and the meat soaks everything in. When you're done mixing, there'll be nothing left as far as water. If there is, it'll be very, very little. And I can see that this is already soaking up quite a bit of the liquid. So I think what I'm going to do now, my hands are getting cold. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to take that break, wash them under warm water, and then I'm going to let this sit for probably about 5 minutes so this meat can soak up some of this liquid, and then come back and start mixing again. You want to make sure you get this stuff mixed up really well, especially with venison. You don't want any of the meat not getting coated. Otherwise, after you get it and pull it out of the dehydrator, you're going to notice that flavor difference right away. That meat won't have any seasoning on it, and it's going to taste just like venison. So, I really like the smell of this packet right now. It's definitely a lot of cracked pepper aroma coming off of this thing. I can feel the cracked pepper in my hands. So I'm really excited about this batch. So we're going to go ahead and wash my hands, leave that sit for about 5. Alright, it's been about 5 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and start stirring again. So this meat has really soaked up a lot of this liquid during that 5-minute time period. I think what I'm going to do with this batch, I'm probably going to put it in the refrigerator and pull it out a couple of times and stir it some more and try and get even more of this marinade soaked up. Typically what I do is refrigerate it for 24 hours before I put it on the dehydrator, but I don't re-stir it. But that's typically because of using the PS seasoning packet. There is no liquid left. So far this one, I really like the coating that this meat is getting. It's actually getting a really good coat. I'm kind of pulling some of the meat apart, unfolding it as I'm doing this, trying to get both sides of the fillet covered with this pepper seasoning. And you'll notice some of them, it looks like they don't have anything on them, but then when you pick them up, they have a whole bunch on them, and you can actually feel the grit in your hands of the pepper. So there's not a whole lot of liquid left in here visibly. Everything's kind of coated on the meat and soaked into the meat. So I'm going to call that good for mixing on this batch right now. So as you can kind of see, very well coated. I'll bring the camera over here and show you the after the mix as soon as I wash my hands back off. So there's the after mix. You really don't see any liquid actually physically in the bowl anymore. You can see the meat is real well coated, and this packet kind of turned everything like an orangish brown color. So what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and take the cover, cap this really nice, like so. Well, I'm going to have to two-hand this. Alright, so with 2 hands I got this sealed on there nice and tight. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to walk this over to the refrigerator. And we're going to go ahead and just go ahead and tuck that in there. And we're going to let that sit. I'll probably let it go for about 6 hours or so, and then I'm going to pull it back out. And then once that one marinates and gets on the dehydrator, I'm going to take another 5 pounds and make another batch. So it's been about 15 hours in the fridge. Pretty good soak. You don't see a lot of liquid in there. I do see some over here on this side. I'm going to give it one last mix before I put it in the dehydrator. So I have a charred dehydrator, and I put it on its highest set point when I do this beef jerky at 160 degrees. Preheated this thing, so I'm going to give this one last mix, and then we're going to go ahead and get meat on the trays. So it's time to put some meat on the trays. I'm going to go ahead and open up the door. One thing to note with this type of dehydrator, anything on like the top 2 trays or top, at least the bottom one, they sometimes don't dry as fast. So during this dehydrating process, I'll usually pull the trays and switch their locations. To get started out, I'm going to try to avoid using the top and the bottom one. and see if I can get away with pulling those 2 trays out of here. So we get started by pulling a tray out, and then we're going to go ahead and lay this meat on there strategically. You don't want to have the meat really tight, because that prevents the dehydrating process also. So the more space that you can give this stuff, the better. One thing that I do know from doing this on this dehydrator is a 5-pound batch will almost fill every tray. I usually can get away with having 1 tray out of this. I usually can't get away with not having 2 out, but our goal today is 2. And this meat, because of all the extra liquid, is a little bit wetter and juicier than I'm used to doing. All that's going to do is make these trays a lot harder to clean once we're done dehydrating. So I don't have any real small chunks to fill that one, so we're going to call that tray good. I try to keep this stuff as clean as I possibly can, because when you're done, it's really hard to clean these off efficiently. So I'm going to go ahead and continue this process for the remaining amount of trays, and we'll come back to you. So we got everything loaded on the last tray. We're going to go ahead and slide that in. I do have 3 extra trays, so the top one we can pull, and then I have these bottom 2 that we can pull out. We're going to go ahead and set those off to the side. So that should help with the dehydrating process. Go ahead and I'll shut the door. What I did notice is this meat is a lot thicker cut than normal because I didn't have my meat slicer. So it's going to take a lot longer to dry. You can dry this to any consistency that you want or desire. I usually like mine really dry. The problem I did find with that is when I go to vac seal it, it pokes a hole in the bag because it's so dry and the bags won't seal. So I think I'm going to pull this stuff off a little wetter this time. Try and vac seal it that way, and then when I want to go ahead and eat it, I'll just pull it out of the refrigerator ahead of time, cut the bag open, and let it dry in the fridge for a day or 2 to get to that dryness consistency that I really like. So I'm assuming this is probably going to be on for probably about 8 hours to get some of those big chunks dried enough, but we'll check on it periodically. We'll probably let it go for about 3 hours before I flip any meat. So we'll check back in later. So it's been 2.5 hours since I put these on. The top rack, I flipped that already. They're starting to stick really bad. They probably should have been flipped about a half hour ago. So I'm going to go through and do all the rest of them and get them flipped. And then we'll leave these go for probably another 2 hours before I check them again. And rearrange the racks if anything's too dry or too moist in here. So we'll be back in 2 hours. So we're about 6 hours in on this cook. I went ahead and I've already pulled this little plate full. So everything here is kind of firm to moist to the touch. If you like things a lot more moist, you could probably pull everything out of here. Some of the bigger chunks that are still in there are still pretty wet to me, but this is kind of in between where I normally would be. I don't think that these are going to wreck the bags. But flavor is really good. It has a strong pepper, black pepper aftertaste. Not hot, but really well distributed throughout the meat. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to leave this stuff go. I think everything that's in there is probably going to be in there probably another hour, hour and a half. Then we'll pull everything out Alright, so we hit that 7-hour mark. Let's open it up, see what we got. So I'm just dipping my finger on these. These are moist, but they are pretty dry. So at this point, I think we're going to empty out this whole dehydrator. As I've been finding out, if you pull this stuff and leave it sit on a plate for a little while, it actually ends up being drier than what it actually feels like in the dehydrator. I have test sampled a couple pieces. I will say overall, it is pretty good. Definitely plenty of pepper flavor. The other thing I noticed, it might be a tick on the salty side, but you have to remember that I did not use the full 5 pounds of venison to make this batch. I cut it short by 1/4 pound. I don't think it would have played that big of a role, but if you're not too fond of high salt content, you maybe want to go a little extra on the amount of venison you put in this one, especially with the Backwoods packet. There's plenty of marinade to soak into these things. So I feel confident you could go over and be just fine. Alright, so with that being said, here's our end product. I'm going to leave this sit on the counter for probably about 20 minutes. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bag this up and vac seal it all. And then mark it up, send it to the freezer. But overall, thumbs up. It's a winner. Thanks for watching.